Hi, this is Bookish Talk, and today we have a guest who is currently residing on Hawaii. That's Angaea Cuna. Hi, Angaea.
Hi. Yeah, this is my artist studio. This is where I make all my books and my artwork. I'm in Hawaii right now, and you can actually hear the frog.
Oh, those are the frogs. I was wondering what kind of tropical creature that was.
Yeah, they're called koki frogs.
And my co-host is Pavel, and he isn't in Moscow for some strange reason. He's in one of the medieval Russian capitals, city of Novgorod. Hi, Pavel.
Hi, everyone.
And we're going to discuss bookbinding and paper making in probably a series of bookish talks, but we'll see how it goes. So I guess we will ask you, Angaea, to start with describing your path to your creative to current moment to finding bookbinding and paper making. How did it go for you?
I've always been drawn to building, so bookbinding has such a sculptural aspect to it, and it also has a multimedia aspect to it. And what inspires a lot of my projects is material, especially materials to nature. So when I took a class in college, our class was to make a book. And it was less sculptural, and it was more about learning InDesign and formatting the pages. On top of that, there was another layer of creating a project to put and document into your book. So it was very multi-level. I had to create a physical project, document it, format it in InDesign, print it, and then create a book. And so I actually thought I hated bookbinding because of the printing aspect. I always try to avoid technology when it comes to my work. But I still remember really enjoying, cutting the Davy board, sewing the pages together, playing with the glue, learning about all the different types of bindings as well, and how there's so many possibilities. So that was 6 years ago, I believe. And I didn't touch bookbinding again until 3 years ago. I started freelancing when I moved to Hawaii. And one of my first bookbinding projects was for this celebrity that I can't mention. And I had to create a triangle book, like triangle like this, that opened from the top like a flower. And it was her poetry and all her illustrations. It was a lot of fun, but it just wasn't fun working for her. And so that took me a step further, and it motivated me to make my own work with bookbinding. So that's when I started getting really creative, but I had no money.
Well, as it happens with young bookbinders and young people in general.
Yeah, I'm on the internet looking at a book press. What? It's $3,000.
Well, you know how the saying goes: the only way to make a small fortune in bookbinding is to start with a big one.
Yep. Yeah. So I mustered anything I could. I've had basic bookbinding tools over the years. But really, I relied so much on natural materials, and it became a very unique parameter in all the designs that I've made. So much that I'm so intimidated with starting leather, but I'm also so in love with this new process of using what's local. And anything shipped to Hawaii, it's the price plus the shipping costs. So I really try to avoid buying things from the mainland, which is the United States. So I try to find local materials, and there's a lot of ranch land here. No one wants to process their own leather. So yeah, I mean, the power of social media, I always try to ask the people who follow me, and they actually sent me a bunch of leather scraps. So I like to think of my process as sustainable, upcycled material, or anything biocentric.
It's always interesting to see how some types of constraints improve your creativity and make you to find new ways and new approaches to design. And this perfectly works in bookbinding, because we already had several guests who had some constraints, and this brought them to create beautiful bindings and unusual structures. So yeah, I'm glad to see that you also found this approach and follow this approach. And
I remember.
And it's also reminiscent of how collage itself appeared. Those were poor artists who had no materials but what laid around, and yet they gave us a new art form.
Yeah, so I'm in my studio right now, but I first started in my living room on the floor because we didn't have any table space, and it was a little challenging because I had cats just walking all over my materials, or just like they just sprawl themselves over the paper, like, get off the paper.
I need to show this video to my sister. She's a great cat lover.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I found 2 kitties on the farm I live at, and so I adopted them too. And I thought one of them was a boy. Even my vet said it was a boy. And then all of a sudden I was like, why is my boy cat pregnant? And 9 months later, or 6 months later, I have 3 more kittens. And that's Hawaii for you. But yeah, I had to really hone my creative resourcefulness. So instead of a book press, I'd have stacks of volcanic rocks. You know, for a sewing frame, I would have long, like 8 feet strings of twine just to tie it from the ceiling or like from somewhere to another thing. And it was fun for a while, and then the more I see other people with their professional process, the more I got discouraged with bookbinding. It just felt really unattainable. But I had a really good support system from different bookbinders around the world. And they said, you know, they were very honest with me. Oh, it took me 11 years to get where I am. 6 years, or I've been doing this, you know, for 30 years. So it's been only 3 years for me. And I just have to stick it out until I get there.
Well, in my opinion, you definitely need to have some fun with bookbinding, and you need to obviously every person has a right to be discouraged and upset at some moments of their creative path, and well, this is also important, and I obviously had really low moments in my bookbinding path as well. But on the other hand, you can really do a lot of things even without expensive equipment and tools. And when I started, I didn't have access to anything because I lived back in Russia, and there is a huge problem with vintage tools, and there is a problem with ordering tools from abroad, because you need to order them from the United States or from Europe, and that's expensive and takes a lot of time, and the package could be lost en route. So it's always tricky. But then I made some of the tools for myself, and some of the friends helped, as you mentioned. There definitely is a community, or some friends can help you, and once again, it's great to see that you continue your to follow this path and to continue to experiment. So what's next for you? What future experiments are waiting?
Oh wow. Okay, so I'm obsessed with these videos online. It's like surviving in the wilderness, building my own bamboo house. And I've been brainstorming an idea of how to do that, but with a book instead of a house. So something really big, and working with bamboo because it's so malleable and so durable, and also just has so many uses with it. The way you play with the material, how thin you strip it. They're also really easy building blocks, and you don't need any expensive tools. You just need a machete. And you know, this has been in my head for a really long time, because every time I get so frustrated that I don't have a certain tool, I always just want to go whack something in the wilderness and just make it there. So that's my next step. I really want to also curate an exhibition for local artists here in Hawaii. There is a very tiny community of bookbinders, and not just in Hawaii, like Big Island, but all of the islands. Like I could in the palm of my hand. And yeah, curating is one of the things I'm really interested in my career path, other than exhibiting and making artwork. And I'm also writing a book. So as you can tell, I like have too many ideas. And I always end up finishing them, but it's like I start.
That's impressive. I also have a lot of ideas, but I usually finish only a couple of them.
It takes me a while.
Quality for quantity, Stepan.
Yeah. I mean, so actually, the very first book I made was a combination of fashion, photography, my own writing, and interviews. So if you guys actually want to see it, don't be impressed. Don't be excited, because it was my very first book. So very plain, but very thick. And let's see. It's just a bunch of my photography. Like this is my dad. Some of my writing. And what kind of fold this is. But so some pages will open up. Yeah, so this was the very first book I made. It's really hard to see.
And I can see how it would make sense that you bound it yourself. It's all yours.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible.
Well, I should say that for many people and for many bookbinders, their first book had a lot of downsides and ugly moments in it. For example, for many bookbinders, you get curved covers, or the book wouldn't open properly or close properly because it was too tight or not too tight or something like that. Your books opens perfectly and it's flat, so it's already much better than for many people.
You know, this reminds me, a friend of mine was showing me her drawings, and she was, oh, this is my teenage year. I'm so cringe. I can't even look at them. And I look at them, it's much better than what I can do now. And I look at her, and I hate her. I mean, so good. You know, it's like Dura. I made this self-portrait at 14 years old. You look at it and you, well, I'm not drawing anymore. Why bother? So I agree. A perfectly functioning book.
Yeah, I mean, it's lasted for 5 years. It hasn't fallen apart. It's just aesthetically ugly on the outside, you know. But from that to this, hopefully you could see it.
Yeah, it's a bat wing, right?
It's a bat wing. This is the ope'apea. In Hawaiian, it translates to half leaf. Half leaf of the taro leaf. So taro is a very important root, an edible root in Hawaii. And so the leaves are heart-shaped, and when you cut it in half, it looks like that ope'apea bat. And so the bat is one of the endemic mammals in Hawaii, but it's completely endangered because of all the hotel, resort, and apartment building development. And so their population is dwindling in numbers. So as part of the process, I had collected a bunch of invasive and non-native plant fibers to make this paper. And then at the time, it was pruning season for a lot of the coffee farms. So the bones, and I wish you could see it better. So the coffee branches I used as bones, and it worked really, really well. Yeah, so I also used mango paper for the book cover, and then black cotton paper for the inside, because they're nocturnal animals. Yeah, so from the first book to this, I became a lot more daring with the sculptural aspect of it and focusing less on what's inside. I go back and forth a lot. I really like writing. I love poetry. So for some reason, I can't put the two together because it's just a lot of mental creativity for each, for writing and then also art making and bookbinding. One day it'll combine.
That's interesting that you say that you are getting more daring with the sculptural aspects and with experiments with materials, because we had a discussion with a bookbinder from the Boston area earlier this year with Daniel Kelm, and he told us a lot about his experiments with book sculptures and sculptural elements in books, and how when he was much younger in late 1970s or early 1980s, he had this, he took part in some sort of bookbinding event and showed some of his sculptural books. And one member of the audience was like, but that's not a book, it's a sculpture. Why are you showing it to us? That wouldn't be a book. Book doesn't need to have all these sculptural elements on the cover or something. And I'm so happy that, book arts moved forward so far from this distant point in the past.
Yeah, you can't jog people's reality. I feel like you got to slowly convince them.
Yeah, that's true.
I wanted to ask you about the public for your work. I mean, about the clients. Who do you make your work with? Do you make your work with a certain person in mind, or does it fully come from you?
When I started working for myself, it was just for me. And then I got a little confused because I was trying to put my business cap on, and I started trying to make relatable books. And so I do a lot of research, like, for example, what sells at Walmart? And it was I mean, they're still pretty journals. It's just not the market that I would fit into. But I was also relying on my art to financially, to fund me. But I'd go to these markets and I wasn't doing very well because I'd spend, like 12 hours on this one book with very select materials, and people are shocked from the price. And it was really, I'm just not a good business person. I think that's what it is. I wish I could just like tell a story and tell them it's magical and like a dragon used to have it or something. And they're like, okay, yeah, I'll buy it. It's definitely another skill to have in art, to sell your. But I was just having trouble selling it as a product. I could sell it as art, but people are looking at me like, I want your product, not I want your art. So every now and then there will be somebody who comes along and they want to hear the full story. They want to know what inspired it, what materials are being used. And then they love it so much you could see the light beam in their eyes. And that's when I know like they want this. This is meant for them. It's connecting with them. And that doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it feels really good.
It's interesting how book arts and book restoration sort of intersects in this way, because when I had my experience with repairing and restoring books, I had this issue all the time that people come to me and bring me some sort of a book for repairs, and I assess it, and then I tell the price, and they're like, "Oh, it's so expensive. I can buy, it's a vintage or antique book, but I can buy another copy of it for, I don't know, half the price you named for the repairs." And I'm like, do you want your book to be repaired, or do you want just a better copy of this book? If you want your book to be repaired, then this is the cost of the work, and I cannot sell my work cheaper than than it is. And in some ways with book arts it's the same. There is a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of process and a lot of emotion going into this work of art, and well, there should be a price for that, at least in time that you spent on making the object. So
yeah.
We recently talked to experimental paper maker from Germany, and he also talked about it. Well, if you've just spent a whole day making 12 leaves of paper, well, those leaves of paper cost that much, and you can't sell them for less. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense.
Actually working for free. Yeah, I like to make this analogy. If society still worked like a village, and there's the local blacksmith making your swords, you see his work, you see his workshop, you see literally the blood on his hands, the sweat on his face. You see him working every single day. You know the person who gave him the metal, you know the person who gave him the rocks or whatever. Nowadays, you don't see the people making our things. And so people are really detached from how it's made. But I think if people saw that, I think they'd value the finished product way more. And it would be a more cherishable object in your life. So when people come to you and ask, can you please refurbish this book? It means a lot to me. Instead of having this very ignorant attitude towards like, oh, it costs that much, this doesn't mean anything to me, I'll just go buy one from Walmart. And I think that's what's missing nowadays. I think that's something, it's not completely disappeared, but it's definitely very rare now.
This is interesting that you mentioned this sort of connection with the world of things and a world of how things are made, because for me, in my path to bookbinding, an important part definitely was one of my early jobs when I started to work as a sales manager at a large IT company, and I sold these server systems to other large companies, and all the time I knew what I'm selling. I understood what are the parts, but for me, all the process was just shifting papers, you know, from one stack to another, and I never really saw the products I'm selling. So it was absolutely virtual for me, and at some point I understood that I just can't continue to work this way, and moved on, and sometime later I found bookbinding. So I found something that's really, you know, you can touch and process in your own way. This sort of connects with what you described about living in this village style life, when you really know how the things are made, and you see the sweat and blood that's led to some objects to appear. So that's an interesting analogy. Pavel, you started to say something.
Yeah, and could you talk a bit about your village, your support system, your people? Who are the other bookbinders? Who are the other craftsmen around you? We know nothing about bookbinding in Hawaii, so we would love to hear more.
And if I can add to this question, are there many arts and crafts markets on Hawaii, and how does this work there?
On Big Island, there's the Donkey Mill Art Center on Kona side, the west side of the island. And they're great. They're so open-minded, and they're all about cross-generational teaching and how to create this intimate space to bring in the local community as well as tourism, but mainly local community. And they bring people from Honolulu, but also from a lot of places around the world. And their biggest focus is sustainability, but also art and science. What else? Storytelling, ancestry, and preserving Hawaiian culture. That's the utmost priority. And so they are actually my little art niche, is the Donkey Mill Art Center. When I first moved here, I worked on a coffee farm, and fortunately my farmer is also an artist, and she's also a bookbinder. And we didn't know that until the day before I left, because I had returned home for a while. And before I had to go to the airport, she had her work because she had to submit it to some portfolio review. I was like, Tara, what? You're a book, what? And I'm leaving, and now we can't talk about it. So anyway, I ended up coming back to the farm and officially living here in Hawaii. So my farmer, Tara, she's been so close, a great mentor, a great friend, a great bookbinder, and also an artist in general. But I've met other bookbinders through the Donkey Mill Art Center, but they don't live here. They live in Honolulu, and there's only 2 of them. And then the rest are people I chat with on social media, but they're like, you know, in Europe, because that's where all the bookbinders are, apparently.
Well, as I found out over the past few years, there are lots of bookbinders in South America. Not that it's much easier for you to reach than the European bookbinders.
Yeah, I actually discovered one. In South America, and then I discovered one more in Vietnam. A few in Indonesia, because that's where all the mills are. and the Philippines too, but not as like, again, like sweatshops, pretty much. But oh, to answer your question about how the village system, right? Here in Hawaii, barter and trade is very common. So it's like, oh, I caught this huge fish today. Can I have some bread if I give you half of it? And that happens a lot. And so, you know, a lot of people go hunting for pigs here because they're invasive, but, you know, they also need to eat. So I always ask, can I have some bones? And I like to use a lot of bones in my work as well. And yeah, materials, people know I'm a bookbinder, so they'll, oh, hey, I came across this really cool recycled cork fabric. Oh, great, thank you. Or I finally found leather for you. Oh, thank you. So it's a give and take, you know. There's this understanding that we're here for each other, and you know, if I see something, I will think about that person who needs it.
What about that? Sorry. What about that center you mentioned? Is it an exhibition space? Do you sell your work there? You meet other artists?
It's an exhibition space and an educational space. So they have lots of workshops, classes, fundraisers, market events, art discussions. It's not a school. It's just like an art center, and that's where I started teaching. Sorry, there's like a lot of mosquitoes all of a sudden.
I wanted to ask about the pig bones. And, you mentioned that you asked for people to bring them to you. And have you ever tried to make bone folders with them?
No, and that has never occurred to me.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they are of any use because of their structure or something. Because as far as I know, most of the bone folders are made with cow bones, but I'm not sure. Maybe pig bones are okay with that. And I know that some people make bone folders with elk bones, for example, or antlers or something like that. And you can make some pretty interesting custom designed bone folders with some strange shapes. Yeah, and for example, when I was studying at the American Academy of Bookbinding in Telluride, Colorado, we spent some times customizing our own bone folders for them to have some strange shapes, for example, curved ones or very thin ones, so that you can, you know, work some narrow in some narrow places or something like that. So maybe there is some space for your creativity there as well.
Ooh, that's a great. I have a box of bones. If you'd like to see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would. Yeah, and I would also love to see how you use bones in your work. That would be interesting. What do you mean? Yeah.
I guess we will take a pause here and make a cut, and then continue in the second part of our talk. As usual, I'd like to say thanks to all of our patrons, all of the members of our community. Thanks to you, we can make these podcasts and move forward and bring new things and new ideas and new formats. And thanks to you all. Please like, ring the bell, share the link, all that stuff, and see you next time. Bye.
See ya.